Okay, so chapter 3 talked about a lot of different factors that go into making assessments high quality and effective, practical, and appropriate to measure students' knowledge and understanding. And to me, when it comes to talking about the practicality and efficiency of assessments, like that seems really broad to me, especially even as I kept reading, I just felt like that seemed really broad just because there are so many specific factors that go into it. And they might be different for every single student or every class. They just might be different. So, what's practical for one student in an assessment just might not be practical for another student. And that's just kind of how assessments goes. I mean, that's how teaching goes for everything. So, assessments, of course, are going to be the same. They differ a lot, but we can still try to do our best as educators to plan and give effective, appropriate, and high quality assessments. So, in order to do that, we have to go into depth on more specific factors. So, that's where validity, reliability, and precision come in. So, to start with, validity is the appropriateness of the inferences and uses from the assessment that's given. So, after the assessment is given, of course, we have to make inferences on student knowledge and understanding, and after we do that, we need to decide if those inferences are reasonable for that particular student. And it's important to do it for every single student, to look at those inferences, and if they seem like they're reasonable and they're pretty consistent, then you would think that the assessment is reliable. And so that's why it's really important to do that, because you might think you have a pretty decent assessment, but then the inferences that are being made from it just might not be reasonable. So then that would lead us to believe that the assessments might not be reasonable or reliable to use. So at that point, validity is extremely important in getting those high quality assessments, because of course when we're giving assessments, we're not just giving tests to give tests. We need those inferences from those assessments, and we need those scores in order to plan appropriate instruction in the future. And especially just to know how to help that student, we need to know where they are. So, of course, we have to have those inferences to be reasonable, or the assessment, there's just no point. So, that's super important. And then we have the reliability and precision. So, this factor is the extent to which scores are free from error. So, of course, right away when I was learning this, I was like, that seems really hard to me to get something free of error. But as I read on, the book said that there's no assessment that has no error. All assessments are going to have some error, but when we come to thinking about this factor when we're planning assessments, we just need to figure out what assessments are going to have low, moderate, or high error. So that's really important to also know your students and know what's going to work for them and what's not. So like the book talked about, this can be very situational. It could be that one of your students is having a bad day, one of them is in a bad mood, so of course it's gonna have error, the assessment is, and that's when we can give that assessment again. But as long as we are recognizing that and understanding that maybe that particular assessment that day does have pretty high error, we don't want to use those inferences from that assessment. So we either need to change the assessment or just give it at a different time, understand what's going on with that student, what we need to do to properly assess them. And it might just be that the entire assessment is off, and that's okay too, as long as we're paying attention to that. Because at the end of the day, we just need to make sure that we're getting accurate scores from our students' assessments, because like I said earlier in the video, that we need these scores to plan instruction and to help our students learn, essentially. So that's why that's super important. And then in the way that I learned it best was just, I felt like validity, reliability, and precision are really the three big things that can go into making an assessment practical and efficient. Like I said, there's so many like little tiny factors that go into it as well. So it's not just these three that I talked about, but those three are really important to consider and can definitely help make those high quality assessments.